The Living Zen-podcast is a gift from the members and associates of the Victoria Zen Centre to you. If you enjoy it, please be sure to let your friends know about Living Zen. If you'd like to support our community, here are a few ways that you can do it. Download the Living Zen podcast app for iPod, iPhone, or Android. You can also purchase additional Zen Talks by Venerable Eshu on iTunes or Amazon.com. One of the most meaningful ways to show your support is by joining our Sangha as an associate. Your commitment of $10 a month will ensure that offerings like the Living Zen podcast and our online e-Zendo will continue to be available around the world to everyone with an interest in truly living Zen. To become an associate, please visit our website at www.zenwest.ca and click on the membership tab. Thank you for your support. Mumonkan Case 47. Doushuai's Three Barriers. The priest Doushuai set up 3 barriers for examining students and asked them to answer each question. 1. The only purpose for making your way through darkness and abandoned grasses to study the subtle Dharma with various masters is to manifest your true nature as it is. Where at this very moment is your true nature? The second is, when you have realized your true nature, you are completely free of birth and death. When the light in your eyes is failing, how do you free yourself from birth and death? The third is, when you are free of birth and death, you know where to go. When the 4 elements have scattered, where will you go? Wu Men says, if you can give 3 turning words here, you will be master over every circumstance and will deal with your affinities in accord with the Buddha Dharma. If you are not yet able to do so, remember, gulping down your food will fill you up quickly, but chewing well makes it more difficult to become hungry again. Wu Men's verse says, one Nien exhaustively manifests innumerable kalpas. The activity of innumerable kalpas is manifest at this very moment. At this very moment, if you can see through this Nien, you will see through the one who sees this very moment. So, Case 47, this is one of the most, I think, well-used koans in the Rinzai line. Very famous. And I have to get Soshin to look at this name. I don't have the tone, but how would you say that?
The first one there?
Yeah.
Doushuai?
Doushuai, yeah?
Doushuai,
okay. Yeah, for me it's even difficult. I've been, all through the Mumonkan, I've been trying to use the pinyin pronunciation for the names of these Chinese masters, because being trained in a Japanese line, all of these have Japanese pronunciations, but it's not actually how they were pronounced. So, Doushuai is this one. Although for me, even so, it's very difficult not to know it as Tosotsu's 3 barriers. It's a very sort of well-known case. In many ways, I think my personal feeling is that it's very much akin to and as significant as the first case in the Mumonkan, Joshu's Mu, or Zaozu Chaochu's Mu, Wu. In that it points to fundamentally the same realization, the same manifestation. Doushuai breaks it up for us, or helps us to investigate it from 3 different aspects, but very much, in many ways, as this case points out, there's not much else to Zen. There's a lot of clarification of subtleties, but when it comes down to, someone asking you, what's Zen all about? These cases, this number 47, is a very strong pointer to what we're doing here. So a little bit about Doushuai. Apparently, he was, as a young monk, very enthusiastic, bordering on sort of pushy and arrogant, it said. Probably quite talented as well, because the story of his life is that he trained and became a master, an abbot of a temple, had many students, and then at some point decided that he would start over again. So left the post of abbot and entered a monastery as a novice again. Now, he also died at the age of 48 years old. So if you sort of take all this into consideration, he must have had quite a fascinating career. There's not too much sort of said about him aside from this case, but he also had no successor. So maybe it was a very steep barrier to cross with him. So the priest Doushuai set up 3 barriers for examining students and asked them to answer each question. So, as is the case with each teacher, developing their own tools, developing their own systems for training, for helping those that come to them for guidance, for support, finding skillful means to facilitate their awakening. So some teachers used sticks, some teachers used work, some people used shouts, some people used elaborate systems of teachings, some held up a finger, some just came up with a few core questions. The only purpose of making your way through darkness and abandoned grasses to study the subtle Dharma with various masters is to manifest your true nature as it is. When we look at the record of Linji, the Platform Sutra, all of these records of ancient masters, we see that in China, in the early days of Zen, it was the common practice to be an itinerant monk. So finding a calling or finding a motivation to shave your head and to seek the truth, to realize your true nature, or even if you want to sort of diminish it, to go and become enlightened, whatever. Why? What's the point of this? What's that all about? Doushuai talks about making your way through darkness and abandoned grasses, and there's a physical reality to these as well as a metaphorical expression to them. So physically in China, the travel for a monk between temples, between teachers, was often hundreds of miles, and there was no monorail or high-speed transit of any way. Being somebody who left home, you wouldn't even have a lot of money for horses or any kind of other than foot travel. So there's no street lights. There's no hustle and bustle of the big cities for the most part. These teachers didn't sort of hang out in cities. So it was a dangerous road. Often masters did their best to not make it easy to be found. They didn't want to be disturbed a whole lot, so they often lived in caves on cliffs, forests, wandered themselves. And so if you wanted to go and find a teacher for guidance in this, it was a difficult prospect. Now, aside from the sort of physical aspects of it, which maybe we have a little bit alleviated today for Zen practitioners who want to pursue this great matter, there are still the metaphorical darknesses and abandoned grasses. Each of us in our lives, each of us in relationship, each of us trying to sort out our environments and situations, our personal motivations, confront these darknesses, these places where we can't quite see clearly into them. And abandoned grasses, the sort of metaphor, the image is just like this sort of untended field, which, imagine sort of wheat growing for a few seasons, and then the farmer dies or something, and the field just goes to chaos. And it's chest-high grasses and weeds, and the we need to cross it, right? Well, it's difficult, and this is sort of untangling our various motivations, our various interests and desires, so that we can actually have a path to walk. This is practice itself. And I think that everybody that engages in a practice like Zen, this meditation practice, this commitment to awakening, finds that to do so isn't just a steel rail that floats smoothly. We're able just to fly along it at high speeds. It's very much like darkness and abandoned grasses. We're constantly trying to figure out how to go about it. How do you do this practice? How do you engage in this activity, this engagement, this practice of awakening amidst the many complex and tangled experiences that we have in life? And so Doushuai says, the only purpose for making your way through darkness and abandoned grasses to study the subtle Dharma with various masters is to manifest your true nature as it is. Manifest your true nature as it is. There's lots of ways that I can think that this has been expressed in my training, or to sort of know who you truly are, realize your true nature, or even, some of the stuff we use on Zen Center marketing materials, right? To discover true you. Once we sort of cut a path through the tangled grasses and put some light in the darkness, then what do we find there? What is it? And how do we manifest wholeheartedly this true nature as it is? This, people are often frustrated with me when it comes to talking about Zen practice in any kind of diminished, what I consider sort of a diminished objective Zen. So many people come to Zen practice maybe for stress relief, or maybe they see patterns in how they make relationships that they don't like. Maybe they want some clarification on what they ought to be doing in their professional life, or where they ought to be living, or maybe they want some to develop some compassion for some kind of illness, or try to resolve some kind of social issue. And often people can be disappointed with me because I don't spend a whole lot of time dealing with such things in specific. And a big part of this for me is that when somebody asks me to talk about whatever, violence, poverty, negative politics, social injustice, physical ailment, any of this stuff, when I look at it, I don't see multiple issues. I see one. And this is what the Buddha's teaching sort of points to. And this is what the Buddha's life pointed to. When we look at the story of the Buddha's life, he went out into the streets and he saw sickness and old age and death. He saw the struggle between rich and poor. He was certainly immersed in the complexities of practice, of politics rather, but kept coming back to that all of these situations, sickness and health and poverty and abundance and relationships and environments, all of these things shifted. And yet you didn't find necessarily a direct correlation between the shifts or the transients in these physical situations to the positive or negative experience of life, suffering, dukkha, dissatisfaction, as he expressed it. So one of the most common things that I come across when I talk to people who have traveled to third world countries or to really poor countries, stayed with really poor people that have very little food, very little education, very little sort of environmental support, is the one thing that really often comes up is that they'll say they seem very happy, or they have very positive relationships in their their family units. And one of the very common things that I see and experience for myself in our own culture, one of tremendous abundance, is dissatisfaction. So the more we have things, the more we want, the less we're happy with the thing that we've got. And so what it starts to point to is that underneath these superficial dissatisfactions, these superficial circumstances, there is a fundamental perception, a fundamental issue that leads us to be dissatisfied regardless. So we might say, I'll be happy and satisfied when I have this job, or when I have this relationship, or when I have this environmental situation. And we can totally believe it. But I think we all also have this experience that upon accomplishing, upon successfully acquiring this thing, does the dissatisfaction evaporate in some kind of permanent, lasting way? And I can say with confidence, no, it doesn't. Dissatisfaction is not rooted to these external things. And so when people ask me questions about what does Buddhism have to say about this, that, or the other, Buddhism is always pointing to the fundamental, this core issue, which is expressed through this first question, through the first case, mu, and through this three sort of core aspects of dukkha, of dissatisfaction, which is first the fundamental confusion, which is often called delusion. But I've always liked a fundamental confusion, because, as I say over and over again, the word delusion means that somehow we're mixed up about what's there. We take it as being something other. It's the the belief in something in spite of evidence to the contrary. But fundamental confusion I like a little bit better, because it's not that we have a mixed up belief about something that's there, namely a self or an I or anything that we think is permanent or fixed. It's actually that we're positing that there is something there. And this is the sort of core, fundamental issue in Zen practice and in Buddhism generally, is that once we buy into that, once we grasp that, then we have the position that is required for the other two sort of causes, or the other two sort of activities that create dissatisfaction, which is, once we posit that there's something there, we cut the cosmos into two, and we find that there are things that we want to acquire. Greed, it's called in the sort of classical acquiring. And we think, oh, if I can have that, then the self is bigger and better and happier and more comfortable. And anything can be put in that we think that way about. And the other one is aversion, hatred, anger. And those are the things in the cosmos, the other half, that we think, oh, if I can be rid of those, or if I can get rid of those, or if I can be away from those, then I'll be better off or happier, or my life will be more complete somehow. So to sort of wheel it back, this first case, or this fundamental point, which is often expressed as the great matter in Zen. We come across this lots of places. This fundamental great matter is, if we recognize that this aversion and acquisition or greed stem from this fundamental confusion about something being there that actually isn't, this great matter is the realization of what is it? What is there? What is this activity, which is expressed in Buddhism as shunyata, emptiness, the absence of anything fixed, permanent, lasting, or separate. It's expressed in the case Chao Chu's mu, or emptiness, nothing, has not. That's what this is about, is not the conceptual, intellectual understanding that there isn't anything fixed or permanent. We can accomplish that with just a few moments of thought. But what does it mean when we grasp that from moment to moment? That this collection of thoughts, this consciousness, this feeling that I'm experiencing right now, this experience is not rooted to anything fixed. There's no solidity in it whatsoever. What is this experience? This is the great matter in Zen. And so, Doushuai says, the only purpose for making your way through, the only reason for dealing with all of this crap, all of this ritual, all of the travel, all of the politics, all of the board meetings, all of the fundraising, all of the garden work, all of the tea drinking, all of the advertising, all of the podcasting, all of this stuff is to manifest your true nature as it is to realize this fundamental point. Okay, wonderful statement, Doushuai. The question now, the demand, the single koan that's required of a student who's practicing with Doushuai is, where at this very moment is your true nature? Or as my teachers put it, how do you manifest your true nature now? What is the expression of this fundamental nature? This is not a hypothetical, theoretical, conceptual question. It is a demand. Show me. And that's the first question. So, and in fact, in many texts, in order to point this out, the case actually reads, Venerable monks, where at this very moment is your true nature? Or in some cases, and now, honored one, where at this very moment is your true nature? And this is something which is really crucial, I think, for students, for practitioners of Buddhism and Zen to realize, is that the point of this is that when we make this faulty choice or this faulty assumption, we're right at the beginning of consciousness, that there is this self. We divide up the world into pure and impure, and good and bad, and higher and lower, and talented and untalented, and intelligent and stupid, and skillful and bumbling, and all of this stuff. And the fundamental point of Buddhism is that the nature, origin, the foundation between a stone and a human, between a Buddha and a Vietnamese pot-bellied pig, there is no quantitative difference. There is one nature. This is why I'm always using this term, one true nature. We say it in our chants, one true nature, over and over again. It's not as if there's two. And so this little remark, and now honored one, where at this very moment is your true nature? Can you allow the limitless capacity of your nature to be manifest in this very moment? Show it. That's the case. It's a high bar. Maybe this is why Doushuai had no successors. The second question, when you have realized your true nature, you are completely free of birth and death. When the light in your eyes is failing, how do you free yourself from birth and death? So, this is a sort of step up from the previous realization. Over and over again, as we practice, I think we may have glimpses of this capacity, of this nature. Over and over again, in little moments here and there, we may even manifest this. And then what we find is that the fixed self, our limited self, kind of is reasserted. We find ourselves buying back into it again as a fixed, separate thing. And at no time is it easier to do the reinvestment in the whole sort of subject, permanent self thing than when we're facing our own mortality or death. In fact, this case is often referred to as the sick room koan, or the deathbed koan, because it's really hard not to latch on to this body when we're experiencing illness or death. And I'm always very interested in how these things are phrased. One of the things that really struck me many years ago, I used to do hospice volunteer work and spiritual support work at hospice. And something really struck me, that in our culture we often juxtapose, and often even in Zen text you'll see juxtapose the life and death. Great matter, or this is a matter of life and death, we say. And it's always sat with me very oddly. And then when I was working at hospice, I suddenly realized why. And this teaching I'm always talking about, this teaching of Zen, this activity of plus and minus, the activity of arising and dissolving. When we talk about it as life and death, we have this sort of very oppositional kind of situation where we're alive or we're dead. And there's nothing kind of on the outside of the borders of those two things. And what struck me was that life is not something that opposes death. There are two activities, but they're not life and death, they're birth and death. This activity of arising and being born, creation activity, and the activity of dissolution and dissolving. But when we take these two activities together, this is what we call life. Life includes birth and it includes death. When we look at this teaching of Zen, it's not to negate selfhood. Yeah? We don't say this fundamental teaching of emptiness means that I am not me and you are not you. It doesn't mean that there being no selves, that this is not a tree or that is not a fire or that's not your car and therefore I can take it and drive it because fundamentally there are no selves and therefore there's no yours and mine, etc. There is a recognition of individuality, of the arising of particular circumstances and situations. There is a recognition of the manifestation of this and that. But there is a deeper recognition that like waves on an ocean, waves come up and waves come down. But we don't mistake the waves on the top of the water for being the whole ocean. And in fact, if we sort of step back and look, we can say, oh, there's a whole bunch going on, right? Like there's waves coming up and waves going down. There's big waves and little waves and they're going in all directions. And it's a very busy thing. But if we like cut the world in half and look at the profile of the ocean, you'd actually change your perspective and say like, well, there's not much going on. It's just sort of a big mass of water. And this is very much the perspective shift that takes place upon this realization. This cosmos is vast and wide and wonderful. I've spent a lot of time recently listening to some podcasts about neuroscience and astronomy and all kinds of different fascinating studies that just confirm this over and over again. This cosmos is constantly engaged in this activity of birth and death. Things are arising and dissolving. Things that are absolutely beyond reckoning small, infinitely small, arising and dissolving, arising and dissolving. And things that are unfathomably huge, arising and dissolving. And yet, the cosmos, as it is complete. At no point in all of this arising and dissolving is anything missing. It's not... So when we think of ourselves, when we have this sort of individual perspective, we think, oh, I'm born, wonderful, I guess. We think, that I'm here, how wonderful. But I think more importantly to this second question, we think that I die, terrible. Maybe we think, what a tremendous loss to the universe. But I assure you, as my teacher used to always say, the universe doesn't care. And in fact, there is no loss. When the waves on the ocean come up and go down, the ocean is neither increased by the up nor decreased by the down. The second question deals with if we're able, when the self is threatened, when the self stands the chance to be increased perhaps as well, are we able to maintain this clarity? Are we able to manifest our nature, our true nature, in each moment of our lives, understanding both of these sides? The third question points to, or I guess probes, tests, whether the second question is clear. When you are free of birth and death, you know where to go. When the four elements have scattered, where will you go? Just remember that these are questions, these are demands. These aren't sort of rhetorical things that are asked just into the air and silence. These are questions that are asked in the context of interview, and the expectation is to demonstrate. When you are free of birth and death, you know where to go. When the four elements of course, earth, fire, water, and air. So it talks about when, if we understand these things as they are, but as they looked at them in these days, everything that we experience, trees and rocks and animals and people, are the coming together in various mixtures of these four elements. We now have, the periodic table of the elements, which is more than four. But to simplify it, to say, so if everything that comes into being is the cooperation or the meeting point of these four elements in certain balances, then when they break apart, where does the isness of that thing go? So if we have water and air and earth and fire, heat, come together and it forms a tree. We have a tree. We say, tree. And then slowly over time, this tree grows and gets old and falls over, and the moisture comes out of it, and the fibers of the tree decompose into the soil. All of the gases transmit or transform, carried away by the air. The question is, where's the tree? Where has the tree gone? And a tree we look at so easily as an inanimate thing. But from the perspective of the Buddhist teaching, the school of Zen, we have to understand that this body, this person, this brain and this mind and this consciousness, this being that we take as I, is not different than this tree, than the mountain, than the ocean. Not two natures. So when these four elements break apart, where do you go? Where will you go? Wu Men says, if you can give 3 turning words here, you will be master over every circumstance and will deal with your affinities in accord with the Buddha Dharma. This is very much what I was talking about before. All of the difficulties in this vast experience of living as a human being, all of the challenges and struggles come down to this single point, clarifying this single point. It manifests itself in an infinite number of ways, but always comes back to this single point. If we can clarify this single point, our nature, Chao Chu's Mu, then how we interact transforms. It's much easier, more straightforward to manifest appropriately. In our Jukai ceremony, in the precept ceremony, there's this whole section that says the Dharma activity gives birth to a child, and that child is the Sila. One who is freely able to follow the Dharma activity freely follows the Sila. Until you're able to freely follow the Dharma activity, you should use these Sila as a guide, a light on a dark sea. It's just so the idea is that the focus of practice is to awaken to this nature. Having awakened to this nature, we respond appropriately to situations. Buddha Dharma. This sounds like a thing. It sounds like there's this thing called Buddha Dharma. But Buddha means the one who is awake. Dharma means law, or and not law like a human law, more like a scientific law, like the law of gravity or something like this. It was what the awakened one, the Buddha, observed about how the cosmos works. It's not like he invented it. He didn't invent anything, and he said as much. Just before he died, he said, I didn't teach anything. He didn't come up with any of this stuff. He just investigated, observed, experienced, and talked about what his conclusions were. And he didn't even say you should believe him. He said, you got to test these out yourself, because maybe I'm wrong. But this, what it's talking about here, dealing with your affinities in accord with the Buddha Dharma, doesn't mean like somehow we're doing a right thing that there's like an external judge of. It's about living harmoniously with the activity of this cosmos as it unfolds. The reason that we're able to do this, the reason that the capacity or the potential to do this wholeheartedly exists, is because we're not different. It's not like we're this thing and the universe is out there, or the universe is this big thing in which we are. The nature of universe and I, the nature of I, are one, not separate. So if you can just grasp this, if you can just touch this, if you can just awaken, realize this, then you stop going through life making decisions, taking actions, making choices based on this fundamental confusion that there are two natures, that there is this thing called self, or that there are so many things that are solid and fixed and permanent and lasting and separate. You recognize one, just one nature, limitless, arising and dissolving, complete at all times. If you are not yet able to do so, remember, gulping down your food will fill you up quickly, but chewing well makes it more difficult to become hungry again. So I think this is fairly straightforward, so I don't think I need to, but it's like, he's saying, it's not a matter of just sort of like diving in and grasping this. Like I said before, we all have glimpses of this from time to time, and even if it's a very powerful insight, even if for 10 minutes we're just like dumbstruck with the fantastic awesomeness of realizing that our nature and that of the cosmos is one, eventually the self is asserted and we can grasp onto it. And sometimes people engage in practice this way. They think, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And we see them even in Zen centers, probably Zen centers all over the world, these enthusiastic people. I want to completely give up everything and become a monk. And they come and, they just sit and do this Zen practice really intensively, and they have this powerful experience. But then they get sick of it, or they feel like, oh, I've had this awakening experience. I've touched this experience of cosmos nature and my nature being one nature. Done. And off they go. But sooner or later, they find that this fixation, this attachment, this belief, this delusion, this confusion about self has asserted, and again find themselves in a position of dissatisfaction, suffering. So, Wumen is cautioning us that this isn't a matter of just like get her done. It's not a matter of just jump in and have this realization everything's going to be good again, or finally. Chewing well makes it more difficult to become hungry again. Investigating this practice, investigating the many ways that self, that this sort of separate mind, this bifurcating mind, this permanent mind asserts itself over and over again, makes it more and more difficult to make those kinds of mistakes. The more we engage in this practice, in this activity, in this realization, in this manifestation of our true nature, of our complete nature, the less we find opportunity to slip, to trip, to grasp onto the fixated self. Wumen's verse, there's a lot of translations, but I wanted to use the original nien, or in Japanese is nen, and it's in the chant that we do during ceremonies, the 10-phrase kanzeon, life-prolonging chant. This word comes up a lot, nen, nen, and it's often translated, and it's really difficult to sort of talk about it, because it means thought moment, or point. We think about time, past, present, future, and I talk about sort of the present moment, but I want to point out that I very rarely refer to it as this moment, as I try not to refer to it as object, like there is this thing called the present moment. I usually use the phrase the activity of this moment, because it's not as if there's ever a place. It's not as if there's ever a halt in it. And so sometimes you'll hear this word nien or nen, and they'll say, like, if you imagine that life is a movie, then nien, a thought moment, is like a single frame. And that's okay. But it actually presents something that you can't do. That the manifestation of this cosmos is more like a river flowing. And it's like the flowing itself of the river. Like you can't catch it. This moment, to talk about it as a thing, it's already passed us by. There is no catching. It's just this activity. And so what this first line is saying, exhaustively manifests innumerable kalpas. I kept this because there's different translations, but this is so remarkably Buddhistic that I thought it was great, because exhaustively manifests innumerable kalpas. It's like what I was talking about with the expansiveness of the cosmos. Kalpas is this measurement, again, that I often talk about, where we have a bowl, the diameter of Ring Road at the university, and as deep. It's like spherical, half sphere, filled with poppy seeds. And you take out one poppy seed every 3 years. A kalpa is the amount of time it would take to empty that whole thing. So it's just, the whole idea is just like, unfathomable long time, right? Kalpa. So one thought moment exhaustively manifests innumerable kalpas. It's saying that like the entire expansiveness of the cosmos is completely contained within every thought moment. In each and every minuscule experience of what we would call time, there's nothing missing in this whole cosmos. It's all there. We have this thing that's so infinitesimally small, but is able to perfectly contain everything. And this isn't a miracle. This is the simple fact of every thought moment you've ever experienced. Nothing missing. And the second line sort of just hits it from the other side. The activity of innumerable kalpas is manifest at this very moment. So, like, there's no later. Don't put it off till later. Everybody's here. It's not going to get any more full than that. At this very moment, if you can see through this nian, if you can see through this, and by see through it, it's like not be fooled by it. If you're not being fooled that this moment is a thing, if you can actually transparently experience that flow, that activity, the dynamism of each moment, then you will see through the one who sees this very moment. So if you can see this dynamic activity, then you're able to see the activity that is you, not two activities. It's not this dynamic and wondrous thing when we're talking about the universe and something different when we're talking about you, what's manifesting as you. It's the same. Very explosive teaching. To see the activity of the cosmos in this moment is to see the activity of self, one true nature, not different. So all of this is really of tremendous importance in our Zen practice. It's not about becoming a nicer guy or a gal, I guess. It's not about becoming Buddhist or a Zen master or anything like this. This teaching is about how are you able to manifest the complete potential of this universe from where you are in this moment. How do you manifest true nature in this moment? Throwing away all of those ridiculous limitations, all of those but I can'ts and I'm not the type of and I don't likes, and actually hitting this moment with the complete potential of the cosmos, not separate. How do you manifest? So, that's the question I guess I'll ask you, or I'll leave you with for the holiday break. Thank you everybody, and I guess everybody out there in podcast land, for a wonderful 2011, a wonderful year of practice. Thank you for committing yourselves to this great matter.
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.